I don't really know where to start on this one, except that John added it to the sheet, and it
Oh
is
yeah.
really, really impressive. Basically, we've got a guy out there who's been stress testing the Switch OLED for years now, and we're getting some fascinating results, aren't we, John? Specifically in terms
Yeah.
of the durability of the screen. So the guy's name is well, it's a YouTube channel, Wolfden.
Or Wolfden, yeah,
Wolfden.
exactly. I've been tracking his progress over the years, actually, over 2 years. It's been 2 years, specifically to see how this fares. And yeah, he finally shared the 2 year test. And his idea was basically he has the Switch hooked up, it's on AC power, and he's using these controllers that have an auto fire feature that
Right.
essentially keeps pressing the R button repeatedly so that the screen never dims and never goes to sleep. So the console's always getting input. He basically took a screenshot from Zelda, put it at the end of the camera roll so when you hit R button it does nothing, and
Right.
just left that screen on screen for 2 years. And that does amount to like 18,000 something hours. So this is like the most extreme torture test one could do to an OLED screen, I would say.
Hmm.
This was definitely something that will burn in a CRT, and I suspect it would cause problems with LCDs, because LCDs also can have issues like this. When we've seen it with Arting's tests, where there's actually been sometimes weird image retention and pixel failures and problems with the backlight when it's been kept like this for too long. In this case, after 2 years, he actually does have burn-in though. But it doesn't necessarily seem so severe as to ruin the usability of the product, I would say. It's not nice looking or anything, but it definitely shows that with enough wear and tear, 18,000 hours worth, you too can have a burnt-in image. And that's the caveat there, is that he literally had to leave this image on all the time, pretty much, right?
For on max brightness as well, I think.
On
Right?
max brightness. Because the thing about OLED is like it's this cumulative time that you leave that screen on without changing content, without refreshing anything. It just kind of stays there all the time. So it worked. But he also tested things like the battery, which, I suggest go watching his video as well for more details on this. But this idea of like what happens if you keep a switch turned on and plugged in for 2 years. And as it turns out, the battery life was slightly better than the one that he'd been using normally. And I would say, based on all of the tests, and there's even more in there, it shows to me that the Switch OLED is a remarkably durable piece of hardware. It's a very well engineered device that seems like it can take some serious punishment. You can basically use it as you want without any sort of fear of failure, basically. That's kind of the takeaway I got from it, which was pretty darn cool, I would say.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this one, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, OLEDs these days don't really seem to suffer from too much burn-in, and I don't think that the Switch OLED is using any software mitigation like pixel shifting or anything like that.
It's not. It is not.
Yeah, so that
The mitigation is dimming, which after 5 minutes it will dim if there's no
Yeah.
input.
unless you have an auto fire feature on your third-party controller.
Exactly.
I also found the battery life figure remarkable. I think in the video he has his Switch playing Super Smash Brothers for 5 hours and 14 minutes. That's in the range of quoted battery life for the Switch at launch, like a fresh unit, which I think is 4.5 hours to 9 hours. And that 4.5 hour figure would presumably be closer to the kind of workload that he's putting his Switch through with a match of Smash Brothers. And I'm astounded by that. I mean, granted, just leaving the screen on, probably the depletion of the battery over that period would be lower. And maybe he's playing his other Switch more extensively with heavier workloads. But that's still just, I mean, that's remarkable. I mean, that thing is a real tank in terms of battery life.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the other thing is just the takeaway is not that the Switch OLED lasts for 2 years.
Right, right.
I mean, this is basically the most extreme conditions. You mean, when you're playing games, you're not going to be having a static screen, which would cause it's the primary issue for the burn-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you've got the same elements, the same bright elements that are persisting literally for years. And I just think it's really interesting to see just how durable this screen is, and the fact that it basically guarantees you're never going to have issues with it, unless you've got a defective unit. But yeah, I think this has been one of. I mean, There was a lot of obviously when the Switch OLED came out, there was a lot of concern that, oh, where's my performance upgrade? Where's my Switch Pro? And, actually turns out that I think the OLED screen is the perfect upgrade it needed, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's awesome.
it just looks phenomenal, right? And I think it's really shown other makers of other handhelds that, it's really time to take a look at OLED technology, even if it's for a premium model, because it's just such a game changer. If you can imagine if HDR could be added as well, that would just add another layer of excellence to an already brilliant concept.
Exactly.
It's just a bit disappointing that the current rumor is that the Switch 2 will go back to LCD, but I guess they'll just do exactly the same cadence that they did with the original Switch, which is to bring it as a premium model a couple of years down the line, or maybe sooner if they can actually, turn it into a much larger.
Still a bummer, though.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, it does seem. I mean, I guess across the board, OLED is still considered a premium option, right? But it would be nice to have it at launch as that premium option.
Yeah.
I guess it makes a lot of extra difficulties in terms of supply chain. It's like, well, how many do you make versus the standard model? I guess that gets a little bit easier when you're much further into the generation. But even so, yeah, it's a bit of a triumph, I think, that particular machine.
I will say, along these same lines, though, you, Alex, and myself, we continue to use OLEDs as our daily drivers as PC monitors, right?
Yeah, now holding up.
Exactly. And as I've said before, I'm not pulling any punches here. I'm using it at the brightness that I want. I'm not taking any mitigations. I'm just using it like a normal LCD monitor. And every couple of weeks, I've basically been logging it and checking it as it goes along just to see if I can see any hint of burn-in or image retention. And I'm going to continue to report on this, and hopefully, over the next year, 2, 3, whatever, we'll find out just how durable these things really are. But so far, on a gray screen and all the different colors, there's not even the tiniest hint of image retention, like not even a little bit, which is interesting because my CX OLED, the TV behind me, that does show image retention when it's had something like this on screen for a bit. It goes away and it's not burnt in, but you actually do see the retention. But on the C2 here, it does not at all. It looks fine. So I'm kind of amazed at the robustness of it, and we'll continue to test it. So
Brilliant.